Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, the Hansa Guhya Prayers, Text 32, Translation and Commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Up on the board? Asti iti na asti iti. Oh, I missed out the word na. Okay. Cha vastu nishtayoho eka sthayo bhinna viruddha dharmanoho avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayoho samam param hi anukulam brihat tat astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor ekasthayor bhinna viruddha dharmanoho avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo samang parang hyanukulang brihattat astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor ekasthayor bhinna viruddha dharmanoho avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo samang parang hyanukulang brihattat astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor ekostayor bhinna viruddha dharmanoho avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo samang parang hyanukulam brihattat
Astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor
Astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor
Ekastayor bhina viruddha dharmano
Ekastayor bhina viruddha dharmano
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo
Samam parami anukulam brihatat
Then, anyone else?
Astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor
Astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor
Ekastayor bhina viruddha dharmano
Ekastayor bhina viruddha dharmano
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo
Samam param hyanukulam brihattat
Samam param hyanukulam brihattat
Astiti nastiti cha vastu nishtayor
Ekastayor bhina viruddha dharmano
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankhyayo
Just don't lean. Then, ladies? Anyone? No. Asti, there is. Iti, thus. Na, not. Asti, there is. Iti, thus. Cha, and. Vastu, Nishtayoho, professing knowledge of the ultimate cause. Eka stayoho, with one and the same subject matter, establishing Brahman. Bhinna, demonstrating different. Viruddha, dharmanoho, and opposing characteristics. Avekshitam, perceived. Kinchana, that something which. Yoga, Sankhya Yoho, of mystic yoga and the Sankhya philosophy, analysis of the ways of nature. Samam, the same. Param, transcendental. He, indeed. Anukulam, dwelling place. Brihat, tat, that ultimate cause. There are two parties, namely the theists and the atheists. The theist, who accepts the supersoul, finds the spiritual cause through mystic yoga. The Sankhyaite, however, who merely analyzes the material elements, comes to a conclusion of impersonalism and does not accept a supreme cause, whether Bhagavan, Paramatma, or even Brahman. Instead, he is preoccupied with the superfluous external activities of material nature. Ultimately, however, both parties demonstrate the absolute truth because although they offer opposing statements, their object is the same ultimate cause. They are both approaching the same Supreme Brahman, to whom I offer my respectful obeisances. Purport. Actually, there are two sides to this argument. Some say that the absolute has no form, nirakar, and others say that the absolute has a form, sakar. Therefore, the word form is the common factor, although some accept it, asti or astic, whereas others try to negate it, nasti or nastika. Since the devotee considers the word form, akara, the common factor for both, he offers his respectful obeisances to the form, although others may go on arguing about whether the Absolute has a form or not. In this verse, the word yoga sankhya yoho is very important. Yoga means bhakti yoga because yogis also accept the existence of the all-pervading Supreme Soul and try to see that Supreme Soul within their hearts, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Dhyanavastita tadgatena manasa pashyanti yam yoginaha. The devotee tries to come directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the yogi tries to find the Supersoul within the heart by meditation. Thus, both directly and indirectly, yoga means bhakti yoga. Sankhya, however, means physical study of the cosmic situation through speculative knowledge. This is generally known as Jnana Shastra. The Sankhyites are attached to the impersonal Brahman, but the absolute truth is always known in three ways. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Shabhyati. The absolute truth is one, but some accept him as impersonal Brahman, some as the Supersoul existing everywhere, and some as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The central point is the absolute truth. Although the impersonalists and personalists fight with one another, they focus upon the same Parabrahman, the same absolute truth. In the Yoga Shastras, Krishna is described as follows. Krishnang Pishangambaram Ambuje Kshanam Chatur Bhujang Shankha Gadadyudayudham. Thus, the pleasing appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's bodily features, his limbs, and his dress are described. The Sankhya Shastra, however, denies the existence of the Lord's transcendental form. The Sankhya Shastra says that the Supreme Absolute Truth has no hands, no legs, and no name. Hyanama rupa guna pani padam achakshur ashrotam ekam advitiyam api nama rupadikam nasti. The Vedic mantras say, Aparnipado Javano Grahita. The Supreme Lord has no legs and hands, but he can accept whatever is offered to him. Actually, such statements accept that the Supreme has hands and legs, but deny that he has material hands and legs. This is why the Absolute is called Aprakrita. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has a Satchit Ananda form, Satchit Ananda Vigraha, a form of eternity, knowledge and bliss, not a material form. The Sankhites or Jnanis deny the material form, and the devotees also know very well that the absolute truth, Bhagavan, has no material form. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. The conception of the Absolute without hands and legs and the conception of the Absolute with hands and legs are apparently contradictory, but they both coincide with the same truth about the Supreme Absolute Person. Therefore, the word Vastu Nishtayoho, which is used herein, indicates that both the yogis and Sankhites have faith in the reality, but are arguing about it from the different viewpoints of material and spiritual identities. Parabrahman, or Brihat, is the common point. The Sankhites and yogis are both situated in that same Brahman, but they differ because of different angles of vision. The directions given by the Bhakti Shastra point one in the perfect direction, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya mama bijanati. Only by devotional service am I to be known. The Bhaktas know that the Supreme Person has no material form, whereas the Jnanis simply deny the material form. One should therefore take shelter of the Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion. Then everything will be clear. Jnanis concentrate on the Virata Roop, the gigantic universal form of the Lord. This is a good system in the beginning for those who are extremely materialistic, but there is no need to think continuously of the Virata Rupa. When Arjuna was shown the Virata Rupa of Krishna, he saw it, but he did not want to see it perpetually. He therefore requested the Lord to return to his original form as two-armed Krishna. In conclusion, learned scholars find no contradictions in the devotees' concentration upon the spiritual form of the Lord. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya says that less intelligent non-devotees think that their conclusion is the ultimate, but because devotees are completely learned, they can understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. This is the verse after the one, comes immediately after the verse that we read this morning, and like the verse that we read this morning and the purport that we read this morning, this verse and purport is very suitable for consideration of philosophy, as we're supposed to be having a philosophical immersion camp. It's quite a surprising statement here that both the astic and the Gnostic, there's a playground outside for the kids, right? Isn't there? Better that they play not here. There's, I believe, one Mataji is looking after all the kids so that the other mothers can attend the program. So it seems like an astonishing statement that all philosophers, one way or the other, they demonstrate the absolute truth. Some do indirectly by saying the wrong thing, or they do so in an incomplete way. Shankaracharya is the most famous and most revered scholar of India, traditionally. Most revered means his particular sampradaya has been the most influential. What he did by denying the personality of Godhead in his philosophy was to verbalize what is in everyone's mind, denial of the personality of Godhead. And that gave a platform for the Vaishnava-acharyas to come in and smash his philosophy to pieces and establish, using the same pramana, the same Vedic evidence, that Vishnu, the personal form of the Absolute Truth, is the Supreme Lord. But at the same time, Shankara, he described impersonal Brahman and impersonal Brahman realization. Jiva Goswami, in his delineation of Gauriya Vaishnava philosophy based on the Srimad Bhagavatam, he takes Srimad Bhagavatam as, first of all, he establishes it as the topmost evidence. So that's in the Tattva Sandarbha. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now we should inquire into the nature of the Absolute Truth. So he does that in his Shat Shandarbha, Jiva Goswami does that. So the Absolute Truth, how we to understand that? We have to understand from Shastra. That's first of all stated, and that's accepted by all Vedic schools. And particularly in his Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami establishes that Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost evidence, and especially for this Kali Yuga. And then he goes on to describe the Absolute Truth. Next is Paramatma Sandarbha. He describes Paramatma and the different Vishnu forms. Then he goes on to Bhagavat Sandarbha to establish the personality of Godhead, and Krishna Sandarbha, specifically Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. Then Bhakti, so that's all on the platform of Sambandha. Then Bhakti Sandarbha is on the platform of Abhideya, what we do. And then Priti Sandarbha, Prayojan, love of God. So he covers Paramatma and Bhagavan, but what about Brahman? He says there's no need to cover Brahman because Shankar's already done that. And we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu refers to Shankara as Acharya. Acharya dosha nahi. He says it's not his fault. He was ordered to do that by Vishnu. So we respect knowing that he is Shankara is Shankara. Shankara Acharya is Lord Shiva. Of course, the Madhva Sampradaya don't agree with that. They take him to be the demon Kichak, who was killed by Bhima. Maniman, was it? Maniman, who was killed by Bhima, killed so many demons. And again, Bhima has come as Madhva to kill his philosophy. So that may be also, that seems to be a contradiction, but it may be also at some portion of Maniman entered into Shankara for I was thinking Kichak because Bhima really pummeled him into a ball. He he made him into formless. So you want to be formless? Okay. So this verse and purport is a good platform to further discuss the topic that I was discussing this morning of scholarship among devotees. Scholarship can be a double-edged sword. Do you know that's an English saying? That means it can be used in a good way or it could be used in a bad way. You use it for cutting something and then you pull it back, and if you're not careful you'll cut your own throat. So we definitely want that we'll be very proud of learned devotees, very deeply learned in Shastra, able to present it, but they should be faithful. That's the first thing. Ado Shraddha. Of course, in the progression of bhakti, the first thing is Shraddha, but Shraddha in the beginning is soft. That is the soft in the sense that they're not talking about soft of heart, but soft in faith. So we want the heart should be soft to prem. Hard-heartedness cannot accommodate Krishna prem, but the Shraddha, if it's soft, it means pliable. It can be changed. It's not firm. So one who has soft or pliable faith is a neophyte devotee. Jaha komal shraddha she kanishtajan. So that is the beginning stage, ado shraddha, and then by advancement one comes to the stage of nishtha, or firm faith. So if one embarks on a scholarly career when one's faith is not firm, one is likely to entertain doubts, become proud. So many anarthas will come in. If the anarthas should be cleared. Therefore, first of all, we have to have faith, and that means a Shastra-based faith. Shastra-based faith, that means on the basis of Siddhanta, proper understanding. Siddhanta alashjan anartha to charena. This comes in the Prakrita Rasa Shatadushini, that we know that Siddhanta balaya chittena karaha alash eha hoite krishna lage sujira manosh. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami enjoins us to not be lazy in the matter of understanding, the proper understanding of how Krishna is to be understood, because by discussing Siddhanta, by trying to understand Siddhanta, the mind becomes attached to Krishna. Conversely, Siddhanta alashjan anartha to charena, who is lazy in understanding this, cannot get rid of anarthas. So if one goes into the great world of scholarship without purification of heart and without being fixed in Siddhanta, in the proper understanding, then simply one's anarthas, the contaminations in the heart will be aggravated. One should study first and foremost to have a clear understanding. That means anarthas will be cleared. But if one's motive is to become well-known or famous, or to try to understand, to think that one can understand intellectually, or to indulge one's intellectual proclivities, that's the main reason. Instead of thinking, when we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books, we should think this is reading for my purification. And edification, the two go together. But the idea that we can understand simply by learning, just like going to a class in the college, that is a wrong idea. That's why tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanenas tattvadarshanaha. First of all, one has to approach those who are fit teachers with submission, not thinking, I'm coming in with my big brain. The big brain can be a big obstacle in our spiritual advancement. That's why Sanatana Goswami, who is undoubtedly a big brain, we don't say that that's Indian English to say like that, right? an overswelled brain. If we think, I know so much already. But Sanatana Goswami sets the standard that I don't even know what to... You tell me, because apana hita hit kichuina jani. I don't know what's beneficial for me and what's not beneficial. You just tell me, because I don't even know how to ask questions properly. He came with that humility, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him as Jogya Patra for hearing the knowledge because of his humility, but also because he was naturally very intelligent, scholarly inclined. Someone can be a very faithful devotee, but they don't have that intellectual capacity for understanding so much. So Sanatana Goswami was a proper candidate for hearing from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we want learned devotees who can expound the philosophy and to the devotees, and to face the non-devotees who try to speak all nonsense to undermine the faith of people of devotees and others in Krishna consciousness. But they should be very solidly fixed in Siddhanta. Now we study to become fixed in Siddhanta, but we can't become fixed in Siddhanta and in proper understanding unless we first of all, as Srila Prabhupada said, understanding means standing under. Unless we take that humble position. So Tadviti pranipatena, standing under, pariprashnen, and then asking relevant questions, not irrelevant questions. There may be so many questions, but as I was saying this morning, it could come in our mind out of curiosity. Why does Krishna dance in a certain way in the rasa dance? Why doesn't he do break dancing? Or why not? There are so many varieties of dancing. Why this rasa dance? He could have done bhangra or any kind of thing. But why does he do this rasa dance? But certain things, they're not the subject of our inquiry, because we can't understand academically. And anyway, the answer to such questions. Why does Krishna like cows? Well, he's a person. He can like whatever. You like dogs, he likes cows. That's all. So that's up to him, isn't it? He likes to dance in that way. So that's up to... So there may be so many questions, but we should ask questions relevant to our level of advancement in Krishna consciousness that can help us to advance. And then, it's asking questions, not that I'll just simply read all the books myself and understand everything. And yes, and we have to hear from devotees about Krishna. In Gita, we should approach those who are tattvadarshi, those who actually know. And again, knowing here doesn't just mean knowing in a formal or intellectual way. We have to hear from Vaishnavas. Avaishnava mukhod girnam putam harikatamritam shravanam naiva kartavya sarpochishta yata paya. We are warned not to hear from non-devotees about the nectar of Krishna, because doing so will be like drinking milk, which is the remnants of a poisonous snake. So milk is very nourishing. It's called amrita. Very nice to drink. But if we take milk which has been drunk by a poisonous serpent, the leftover, it looks like milk, It might even taste like milk. It might even taste better than milk. I haven't tried it. But to us it might seem more attractive. If we're in contaminated consciousness, then hearing from non-devotees might seem even more attractive. Just like we hear somebody say, oh, we don't hear Srila Prabhupada. He always says the same thing. Well, let's go and hear from some Rasi guru and take us to a higher level. So it might seem more attractive, but we're warned that it just like the milk might seem more attractive, but it's poisonous and it destroys our actual spiritual life. So we have to be very careful who we hear from. That's why when I hear devotees getting into academic studies in the university, I become a little apprehensive. If a devotee was in if someone was in academic studies and they come to Krishna consciousness, they're usually very good devotees because they came out of that nonsense and they transcended that the whole academia, which is highly atheistic. Of course, there's here in America you have Christian universities. Actually, all the universities were Christian in the Western world. They were all Christian. Yale, Harvard. They were all started off for teaching the Gospels and the Bible. But they now, if you go to Harvard, even if you go in believing in God, they'll make sure you would come out as an atheist. But there are still Christian universities here. Tamal Krishna Maharaj went to, what's that, Southern Methodist Union, something like that. I don't know if they're still Methodistic or whatever. Is it? Anyone know? But there are schools which even they're offered big grants from rich people to compromise, but they won't do that. They have that much faith and attachment to their own system that they want to study in that way. So someone who comes out of the academia is not actually atheistic. They won't say, but the academia is agnostic, because they'll just say, well, we can't know if there's God, so we shouldn't promote that there's God because we can't know, and no one can know. Which means they are virtually atheistic, but the academia is agnostic. They say, well, maybe there'll be some evidence someday. Maybe Jesus will come back, but you wouldn't recognize him if he did come back. It's just like people didn't recognize him even when he was personally present, and people did. I'll only believe in Krishna if he personally comes in front of me, and he'll come in front of you, and they won't believe him either. Oh, you may be Krishna, but you're not what you say in Bhagavad Gita. You're not the Supreme Lord. So it's hopeless. Some people are hopeless. Duryodhana, he personally saw when he tried to bind Krishna, and Krishna expanded himself in so many forms, universal form like that, and he said, it's just some magic. He knows magic. That's all. He wouldn't accept. He would never accept that Krishna is the Supreme Person. So if someone is taking to academic studies after coming to Krishna consciousness, that's more dangerous. So if they come in after being through all that garbage, then they're going to be in a better position than someone who feels attracted to go into that. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because it's very bad association. Because the academia is committed to relativistic thinking. Just like, even if you study, maybe that's the most dangerous thing, to study Vaishnavism. Because it's absolutely relativistic. A devotee is actually a devotee. He will say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in academia, you can't say that. You have to say, according to the Vaishnavas, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and immediately takes all the force out of it and completely relativizes it and makes it sound like it's just some sectarian belief of some group of people. And the Vaishnavas say that, and the Shaivas say this, and the Stephen Hawking says this, and so many people say so many different things, and we're studying it. So we are superior to you because we're studying you. You go to a guru to study submissively, but if you study the guru, then you become more than the guru, because he becomes your object of study. And it's very difficult not to be affected by that bad association, because just like one of my godbrothers told me that when Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he first went to university, and he wrote his first essay, and the professor told him, "You can't write all this Hare Krishna stuff. You're in the university now. You can't write like that. You have to do it in our style." So he had to present it relativistically, and it's very dangerous, especially for those who are acharyas and going to teach others, and even though the idea is to bring Krishna consciousness to the academia, they're well protected. They have their armor, their intellectual armor. And I often give this example that if you go against what they consider to be correct, it just won't be accepted. They're well protected. The example I give is of Fred Hoyle, who was accepted as the world's #1 astronomer. He was knighted, British Sir Fred Hoyle. He was the head of the Royal Society, which is the most prestigious academic organization, the most ancient. One of the founders was Isaac Newton, and he was the head of that. He was an astronomer, and looking through you don't look through telescopes anymore, do you? It's all on computer screen. So looking at his telescope, he said, looks like Big Bang's not true. And he was booted out. He was out, the biggest of all. And he was no longer accepted. So it's like that. You can't, you can try and get a little chink in there. But basically there's a very solid ethos or approach to knowledge by which one is they know very well that all kinds of people want to get in there and promote their own ideas, and they're very well protected against that. But what happens is that the devotees, they themselves become in, because if you're talking like that all the time, that's why we're supposed to be with devotees and speak about Krishna in the way that we're taught to do so. But if you're talking like that all the time, yes, the Vaishnavas believe, ha, 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 those silly Vaishnavas. They may say even respectfully, but in their mind is thinking that after all, they just believe in something. They're not as advanced as us. We're scholars. We don't believe in anything just because some religion. Religion, that's silly, isn't it? After all. So what happens? They come back, and instead of bringing Krishna consciousness in there, the influence of the academia comes more into devotional society, especially when they write books and they're distributed, because they write books and they have to write which will be accepted by the academia, and those books are also distributed among devotees, and they get all this kind of language. According to some, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited all these supernatural powers, or the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu firmly believe that he had supernatural power. And this kind of, it doesn't deny it, but it doesn't accept it either. So it's a very, very dangerous thing. In that sense, the STEM topics are probably better. The science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because they're not so clearly ideology based. There is, of course, the philosophy of science, philosophy of mathematics, but it's not so much ideational, because when you're studying religious studies or anthropology or gender studies, that's about the worst. It's all ideational. It's based on ideology and interpretation of phenomena, whereas the STEM topics, they're studied for practical usage, and then you get into research also. And then when you get deeply into research, then you get into philosophy, especially with quantum mechanics and mathematics. Yes. One of the greatest philosophical works of the 20th century, that was Bertrand Russell along with Alfred North Whitehead, Principia Mathematica, I think it was called, and it was huge, multi-volume mathematical proof of he spent several volumes proving that 1 + 1 = 2, but all mathematically, mathematics and the interface. And then he thought that's the end of philosophy, because I've spelled out logic. It's all in terms of mathematics, and of course it's not the end of philosophy. As soon as you get into philosophy, then they get into trouble, because they think they've got it all worked out. But in the universities in the Western world, and pretty much all over the world, especially in the English-speaking countries, and definitely very much infiltrated India, subjects that are heavy, the subjects like anthropology, sociology, even psychology, they're politicized by feminism and Marxism, and now we have what's called wokeism. It's highly political. You're not allowed to even think, let alone dare you say, for instance, that you wouldn't say all men are created equal. You have to say all men and women are created equal. But you can't say you have to say that. Everyone's equal, although there are obvious differences. Men and women are the same. There are obvious differences, but they should be equal in all respects. And the idea that there should be any stratification in society, hierarchy, is completely rejected. And those who they see society in neo-Marxism, they see society in terms of the dominators and the exploited, and the dominators should always be dragged down, and then someone else comes up, but they want to just drag down the dominators. So if you happen to be white, male, and of Anglo-Saxon extraction, you are, it's like a caste system. You're a demon. You must be, to have that biological background. And if you're heterosexual, that's even worse. That makes it even worse. So it's highly polluting to have such association. So, if devotees can go into the academia or interact with them and interfaith and all this kind of thing, if they can do it, they should maintain faith in the transcendental reality of the inconceivable pastimes of the Supreme Lord. I was seeing a I can't remember which atheist it was, maybe it was Dawkins, was speaking with an apologist for Islam, and Dawkins, or whoever it was, said in sarcastic way, "So you really believe that Muhammad rode on a horse to heaven?" And he said, "Yeah, I believe in miracles." He didn't say, "Well, maybe that's allegorical," or no, he said, "Yeah, I believe in miracles." Didn't have any hesitation in saying so. So we shouldn't say, "Yes, you really believe that Krishna expanded himself into 16,108? Yeah, why not? Why not? Who are you? You haven't seen it, so you don't. But no one can do that. What do you mean no one can do it? You can't do it, you rascal. Of course, if we're dealing with academia, we may not say that. But there are so many Christians also. They don't have any shame in saying that, yes, Jesus rose from the dead and he's coming, and they'll say the same argument. Well, how much do you know? How much do you know? You think you know so much, but we're tiny living beings with very limited intelligence on a tiny little planet in a blip in time, and we're going to talk about as if we know everything, and we can say that God can't do this and can't do that. So we should maintain our faith, and because we're going to come in contact with people who are very skeptical. If you're going to go into that arena, they're very, very skeptical, and we may try to, because they're very skeptical, and they speak to you in such a way that as if you're stupid to accept what you accept. But we shouldn't be intimidated by them. We should just accept and maintain faith in the Vedic understanding of history. This is very important, as opposed to the one which is in line with the humans evolved from lower life forms, and then there were savages, and gradually they became more advanced, and then they founded, then they became scientists, mundane Darwinist views about India, Aryan invasion theory, Mohenjo-daro, Indus Valley culture. We can understand. Obviously, the Bhagavad Gita came after Lord Buddha, right? And that means the whole Mahabharata came afterwards also, which means that the Vedic, the propounders of Vedic culture, traditionalists, say that Krishna came approximately 5,000 years ago. But we can understand from history, from the Bhagavad Gita addresses issues in Buddhism and addresses issues, we can see the philosophical issues that were there. So we can understand that Bhagavad Gita must have come after that, so Mahabharata came after that. And by all this very intelligent analysis, they take the basis of our whole understanding and whole faith in Shastra, just take it away. By scholarship. So we had to be prepared to defend that. They've inserted the word mythology in relation to Shastra, Hindu mythology, and Hindus are so stupid, they use this word also. And the idols, instead of saying Sri Vigraha, Sri Murti, the idols. So in this way, they undermine the whole basis of Vedic culture. And Vedic culture, I mean, all the culture, they just developed. Everyone was savages, and then they developed gradually. And all languages they developed from I kill you. Developed. They can't explain how Sanskrit is literally Sanskrit. It means Sanskrit literally means perfectly made. It's a perfect language. They can't explain that. But they have the idea that, Vedic culture is just Vedic culture, we understand, is properly followed. Vedic culture is the culture of the spiritual world. But they think it's just another one which developed just like so many other cultures developed from savages. And so all the and we see one of our great scholarly devotees who went to Harvard University came out telling us that Prabhupada's always talking about Radharani and the gopis wearing saris, but he doesn't believe it because he went through Harvard University, and he wants to tell us that this Vedic culture is just another culture, and Krishna didn't restore the cloth of Draupadi because he'd read, some Harvard scholar did some analysis that is some interpolation or something. It's not there in the original Mahabharata. All kinds of atheistic rascal ideas, and because he's a big scholar who's been to Harvard University, we're supposed to accept it. And is wearing sari. It's just part of Indian culture. In Vedic style, food style, and everything. It's Vedic culture. But Western culture is the most advanced culture, right? You learn that at Harvard University. Because after so much development over so many years, we now came up to this level of culture. And anyway, the whole world's accepting Western culture. There was an article in Time magazine, maybe 25 years ago, talking about American hegemony, how that was after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they showed a picture of the McDonald's arch in Beijing and Coca-Cola in a village in Pakistan, showing American culture is everywhere. And I wrote a letter which they published saying that to show that McDonald's and Coca-Cola are spreading all over the world is nothing to be proud of. That America, be careful that you don't go down in history as the most intellectually decrepit civilization ever. And they more or less like that. It's in the Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life book. Actually, they edited it, unfortunately, but they more or less the gist is there. But they think, yeah, American influence is everywhere. So but every civilization thought, the Romans thought, our civilization is the greatest ever. The Babylonians are now the Egyptians, the Corinthians. They all thought our civilization is the greatest. And of course the British, they still think they're the best, even though they're just some rubbish little country running around trying to please America. British foreign policy is made in Washington. Everyone knows that. Who's the foreign minister? And it doesn't matter who's the foreign minister. They have to take orders from this side of the pond. And of course, Hitler thought we are the Aryans, we are the greatest. Blonde hair, blue eyes. He didn't have blonde hair or blue eyes himself, but he thought that is the pinnacle of civilization. So every civilization that's powerful, and they come up, it's like some civilization comes up and then it goes down, and there's another one comes up and then they go down, and another one comes up and then they go down, and they all think, yes, this is the greatest civilization ever. So our own silly devotees, they actually believe all this stuff they learn in the university. And instead of saying Vedic culture is the topmost culture because, first of all, it is in its purest and best form a facsimile of that of the spiritual world, and because the aim of that culture is based on the Vedas, which Vedic culture means Varnashram culture, another very unpopular word in the higher echelons of ISKCON today, Varnashram. It's Varnashram society which helps one, or even if one is not very spiritual. It's not that everyone in Vedic culture in India is very spiritual, but automatically they learn respect for sadhus, for Shastra. They may be materialistic. As we were talking this morning about the Mimamsakas, they're absolutely materialistic, but they have faith in the Vedas, and they follow certain Vedic rules, and they can be, because what happens by following the path of karma, sarva karma akilam partha jnanam parisamyate. That by following the path of karma, one should eventually come to the platform of jnana. So it's a purifying culture which ultimately leads one to Krishna. So devotees, if they're going to work in academia, they should not go with they have to find a way to go against the academia. Otherwise, what's the point of being in there? If you go along with them who are practically, as Rajiv Malhotra has pointed out in his Breaking India book, and he's bringing out Breaking India #2 now, The Snakes in the Ganga, has pointed out that their aim is to destroy traditional cultures all over the world, and specifically in India, by giving these ideas that whatever you believe must be wrong, and we know better because we are from the West, and we are scholars, and we are neutral scholars. It's not that we have anything against you, but you're just wrong. And that's completely infiltrated the academia in India itself. And the biggest enemies of India are at JNU, probably, the Jawaharlal Nehru University. They should just shut the place down, actually. Right? And and we have the Wendy Donager's daughter over there, this Thapar, Romila Thapar. So they're working against Indian. They're fully convinced of the neo-Marxist outlook, and they work against the traditional understanding of Indian culture. And then whenever they come across something they don't like in Shastra, they say, oh, it's an interpolation. I've heard Hridayananda Maharaj. He loves to quote that Madhvacharya says that Mahabharata is ati vikshipta. There are a lot of interpolations. And then anything he doesn't like in it, he says it must be an interpolation. And they're basically a derisive mood. But they may have a facade of respect. But basically, it's disrespect. And again, they want to redate all the Shastras and shuffle it up in their own way to come up with their own theory. So our devotees, in their research and their writing and their speaking, without shame or unease, they should give priority to the traditional understanding of religious history. In the academia, when they're studying, what you might say, religious studies, they refer to primary sources and academic sources. The primary sources are the Shastra and books written by insiders, and then then they have the academic sources, which are written by their in an unbiased way by the academia. They consider it unbiased. They're absolutely biased against the traditional cultures, but they have this idea that, well, we're just studying, that's all, in a scientific way, without any preconceptions. It's very difficult to do so in academia. But then if you can't do it, then what's the point of going in? What do you gain by doing that? One devotee, he was just going into academia. He just started academia. I said, "Why are you doing that? You have so much knowledge. Why are you going to academia? You could preach among our devotees and share that with them, and you can attack all these academic views." But I told him, you have to teach about Vivekananda, right? You have to do that, and because he's teaching like Indian studies. And he said, yeah, and you can't say against him. He said, no, but you see, the students, they can pick up on the subtle likes and dislikes of the teachers, and gradually you can influence them. But you have to go in and teach the glories of Vivekananda, among other things. So really spoiling your own life and spoil all the knowledge you get, and you've imbibed, and you have so much brain given by Krishna, and then you just have to go and enter the world of the demoniac scholars and pretend to be one of them, and you pretend so well that no one can tell the difference. So if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. and then you have to hide you can't open. They might even know. You may say, yes, well, actually I'm a practicing devotee of Krishna, but you can't flaunt that. That's not your main persona. That's what you do in your private life. But you're not able to bring that into your academic career. But if you're going to go in there, you should identify strongly in what we ourselves believe and understand and accept. We have to identify with what our acharyas have given us, not with the academia, which is very difficult when you have to write and speak and in just the opposite way. And you have to associate with them very close. And association, when we talk about association with devotees and association with others, there are various ways of association. One of the main ways is by sharing ideas. That's why we associate with devotees and we hear from devotees. And if we hear from non-devotees, then it's going to affect us unless we're very, very strong. We were just discussing this morning about the Kumarila Bhatta. He went into the association of Buddhists to learn all their philosophy for the sake of defeating it. And he went in as a Vaidika and he came out as a Vaidika. He was very strongly fixed in that, but not everyone can do that. And we see the case of Madhusudan Saraswati. He was a Vaishnav from Bengal who went to study Advaita philosophy for the sake of defeating and became an Advaitavadi. He never really gave up his Gauriya Vaishnavism fully, but it's disputed. But he's an Advaitavadi because his most famous work is Advaita Siddhi, which was written to refute the views of the Madhva Sampradaya. So he's definitely an Advaitavadi, but he says things which are devotional also, and that's often quoted. Krishnat param kimapi tattvamaham na jane. That's quoted in the Gita Press, Gita editions. They give that verse from Madhusudan Saraswati. I don't know any higher truth than Krishna. So he says that, but in the meantime he's promoting Advaitavada, and he's one of the big heroes of the Advaita Sampradaya. But he went in for the sake of understanding it to defeat it. Jiva Goswami also went in with the same idea, came out in a very short time after having understood it all. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, well, he didn't go and study under the Mayavadis. He did spend quite a lot, when he was living in Puri, he did often frequent the Govardhan Mutt of the Shankarites, but to the extent that some people thought he was becoming one of them. But we don't hear, it's not specifically stated that he studied under them. And not even to just be a Vaishnava in general, but we are Gauriya Vaishnavas, right? Specifically. And a very, very strong faith and not inclined to doubt what our acharyas have said. And always appreciate traditional scholarship, even if some technical fault might be found in that, as that will come up, just like I gave that example of Gaura Purnananda this morning. But then it says, oh, you see, they don't know. We have to accept that the acharyas, the great acharyas, are persons in touch with Krishna. They're not writing simply on an academic platform. they are inspired by Krishna, just like Srila Prabhupada said. I didn't write these books, Krishna wrote these books. He may say, well, you see, there's something seems to be a mistake in there, but even if we find out something that is technically incorrect, we should not doubt the veracity of what Srila Prabhupada has given us. Some technical errors may be there, but that's there in this. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was meeting with Keshav Kashmiri, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after showing all the mistakes that Keshav Kashmiri made in one verse, or actually said, I'm just pointing out some of them. If you analyze deeply, there are unlimited faults. But he said, anyway, it doesn't matter. We see even in the writings of Bhavabhuti and Jayadev and greatly respected authors, there are mistakes in them also. So if you want to find mistakes, you can find mistakes, but we have to have the basic faith that Guru Mukha Padmavaka, what the Guru teaches, is coming from the spiritual platform, and that we make one with our heart, not which comes out from the contaminated hearts of people who, after all, for all their scholarly rigorousness, are simply full of lust, greed, anger, illusion, envy, and they're ignorant of the absolute truth. For all they're puffed up. The etiquette is there, which we should maintain, of respect for for Vyasadeva and his representatives, who are the commentators on the Shastra. And we shouldn't be too eager to. There may be some scholar who comes up with some new interpretation. There are people, Westerners, outside the tradition who by their scholarly analysis, they come up with some new understanding, but we don't accept what they say. We accept those who are in the Acharya line, those who are coming in the line of Acharya. We have no reason. We're not at all bound to accept. We can just reject from the outset what those who are not in the Sampradayic line say. Of course, we may need to scholarly debate with them to defeat them, but otherwise we don't give any credence to what they say. They're motivated by envy. They're not inspired by Krishna. So yeah, it's even in the university, if you get the post of a teacher, you're a teacher. You're not a guru. You have to teach in such a way that is in line with the academic orthodoxy, and you're supposed to teach in such a way that ideologically the theory is there that the students can take it or leave it. It's not the same as a guru-disciple relationship where the disciple is eager to understand the absolute truth. But the student is in the class, they're interested, that's why they're enrolled for the subject. But they don't, when they're studying, today you may give a class on Gauriya Vaishnavism and tomorrow on Native American religions, and they just, okay, right, and get comparative religion like this. So if one compromises one's ability to speak straightforwardly in very dangerous ground. Now, Srila Prabhupada did want the Bhaktivedanta Institute to move among scientists, but to present to them in a manner, presenting the truths of Shastra, but approaching it through the medium of Shastric knowledge. That requires tremendous expertise. I have no idea how that can be done. But that was the idea. But not to compromise with their ideas, but to take their system of knowledge and use it to reveal the truth of Krishna. And of course, there are many Christian scientists who take this very seriously. That the existence of God can be inferred from scientific observations and analysis. So we should do that. And we should do. The existence of God can be understood from Shastra. This is the way to understand God. If here we have information of God. Janmadya Saryaton Vyaditaratas Chartesh Rabhignaswarartene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kaviya Muhyanti Yat Surya Tejo Vari Mridangyata Vinimayo Yatra. You went too fast. Tejo Vari Mridangyata Vinimayo Yatra Chisago Misha Dhamna Svena Sadani Rastakurkang Satyang Parandi Mehi. In one verse, we have so much knowledge of God, so much understanding of God. Where did this come from? Is this coming from some savages? This is knowledge of God. So don't be ashamed of it. It's something to be proud of. But even the way we dress and the living in the dhams and everything, this whole this is our culture. We should subscribe to that. Don't be enamored by the West and think everything is so wonderful here. This is, after all, the civilization of the demons. So we want to promote that and uphold that, but don't be enamored by this Western culture. Of course, Srila Prabhupada did say that you can be Krishna conscious in a suit and tie. You can be, but he also spoke of cultural conquest. So Krishna consciousness is a whole package. Brahminical lifestyle. Actually, scholarship in Vedic culture, scholarship is only for brahmanas, and brahmana means, contrary to what is considered in ISKCON, that when you've got first initiation, you haven't blooped after another 6 months or so, and you pass one test or something, 1 or 2 tests, and then you get a thread, and then you're a Brahmin. But Brahminical, it's a whole culture and a way of life, living simply, not depending on others. It was very difficult in the Western world. I've asked devotees, why are you going to all this academia? I said, well, I have intellectual inclinations, but ISKCON doesn't support if you want to do intellectual work. So you have to go into academia. It's just like, what is that? Better to sweep the road than show the deity for making a living. So it's better to drive a truck and listen to Prabhupada's lectures while you're driving than go into academia. And if you're going to start talking all this compromised way, if you have to do something for a living, so you may think, well, it's very prestigious to be in the university and this. To hell with prestige if you're going to get. And literally to hell, that's where you go. It's very, 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 very dangerous. So it's a Brahminical lifestyle, very simple living, relying on Krishna, absorption in Shastra with fidelity to Shastra. This we need to establish. It's one reason, again, why this whole academic thing has come up is because we don't have Varnashram society. Actually, devotees who want to live as Brahmanas and study Shastra and teach Shastra in the traditional Vaishnav way, they should be supported by grihastas who are not doing that. But we don't have that culture, unfortunately. So we have a lot of work to do. Srila Prabhupada, he wanted to establish Varnashram beginning with a Brahmana class. So Brahmanas should be very scholarly, but not that kind of scholarship. Or if you do go into that, and if one is actually able to make a difference, then good, do it. Get into the academia. But if you're going to get compromised, then it's suicidal. And devotees may overestimate how strong they are. And they may not even notice how much they're getting compromised. I just heard 2 days ago, I was speaking with a devotee in academia, and I was saying some of these things to him, because I was asking him questions about some different things, because you can get to know a lot. If that's what you do, you study. So I was asking him specifically some questions about Buddhism in relation to Veda Paurushayatva, which is a subject I'm very interested in, establishing that the eternity of the Vedas, that they're not produced by any person. So I was asking him about this, and I said to him, "Look, you're in academia, and you have to." He said, "No, we've got our own little niche here, but no one's properly funding." He says, "I'm teaching Jainism. Not that I'm interested in Jainism in particular, but the Jains are paying because they have money for a seat in Jainism." He said, "And if someone would make a seat of Gauriya Vaishnavism, I'd teach Gauriya Vaishnavism as it is." But he said that there's some institute of Indian studies or something at Berkeley, Graduate Theological Union. So he said they're not. You're from there, right? You know, they're not totally. They don't have to be totally compromised. And he told me one of the devotees who had gone into academia, he's actually a disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj from Bengal, West Bengal, who told him to go into academia. So he was in Chicago, the most prominent institute for South Asian studies, Chicago University. He was there for quite a few years. He had quite a good, but he came out of it because he said, "I don't want to do it." I was just told that he didn't want to do it anymore. I want to teach Gauriya Vaishnavism as it is. So he's trying to get his own institute together, but no one's funding it. So anyone with a few $1 million in their back pocket, give some here first of all. And you can consider that also, because there are good devotees who want to get deeply into the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and teach it as it is, but they need support also. And I'm going to finish now. Hare Krishna. Is there any questions on this? Questions, comments, or protests? Next session, if you don't mind. Excuse me. Because I like to be Brahminical in the matter of being regulated at the time I take my food. Because Brahmana Bhojana Priya. Brahmanas like to eat. That's not the only quality. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vicha padita.